Good afternoon. It's just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish, and with me in the studio, Mike Robinson.
Afternoon. Can I just say before we start, that's a particularly fetching tie.
Well, thank you very much to the lady who kindly donated this very spectacular tie, and I thought I'd make an effort and put it on, so I'm proud to be illuminating the studio. Well, where are we? We're Friday the 25th of April 2014. I'm very pleased to say the weather here in Plymouth is bright and sunny and quite warm. But we can already tell from the chat box and people around the country that Wales is cloudy and gloomy. And up north, we believe that the day has started with some fog. So hopefully it will clear up and maybe we'll get a bit of dry weather for the weekend. Well, this week has been very, very tricky for the UK column team because it's been exceptionally hard to pull out worthwhile news from most of the mainstream press and indeed the good old propaganda machine, the BBC. So we've decided to focus on a couple of issues today which are simply not being properly addressed by the so-called mainstream media. And we'll start off with the important issue of jobs. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, so starting off with jobs, this is Lord Freud, or should it be Lord Fraud, I'm not sure. Today sees the rollout of the claimant commitment for job seekers, and Lord Freud said, with universal credit, we are creating a modern and sustainable welfare system that is fit for the 21st century, one that supports people when they need it and helps them become independent. The claimant commitment redefines the relationship between job seekers and the state. Claimants receive greater support to get into work from their work coach, and we expect them to do all they can to find a job as quickly as possible. So what's this about? Well, here's the government press release on it. The claimant commitment is a new form of job seekers agreement that outlines what job seeking actions a claimant must carry out while receiving job seekers allowance. It emphasises claimants' responsibility to do all they can to look for work in return for the support they receive from the state. And they go on to say that when someone makes a new claim for job seekers allowance or returns the job seeker allowance from the work programme, they will attend an interview with a work coach. At that interview, they'll agree a personal plan outlining what the claimant will do as part of their claimant commitment to give themselves the best chance of finding work. This could include regular specific tasks and training opportunities. So what do you make of that, Brian?
Well, I think it's blatant. Let's get some more leadership training into another area of society. So we're going to, as usual, go for the vulnerable people, which is people seeking for work. What sort of leadership training is this going to be? Well, essentially, it's going to be reframing, reprogramming NLP to get inside the minds of the people who need jobs.
I think that's absolutely part of it. I think the other part is to make the actions that are required difficult enough that more people get caught in the trap and find themselves on sanctions.
On sanctions or beginning to feel stressed and unwell, in which case we can offer them mindfulness training.
Indeed.
And that's something we'll be picking up on next week, the massive attack on the minds of school children. Michael Gove now pushing to get Oxford Psychiatric Department's mastermind mindfulness into most of the schools in UK, but we'll bring you up to date with that, as we say, next week. Well, on the subject of jobs, Cornwall is one of the areas of the country which has been exceptionally hard hit, and over the years many of the key skilled jobs in Cornwall have disappeared. Now, what prompts us to pull up Cornwall? Well, in the last day or so, we've had this so-called fantastic news that Cornwall has been granted minority status within the UK. And of course the BBC quick to pick up on this, and here we see a Cornish person, I believe, waving the St Piran's Cornish flag. So is all of this good news? Well, we don't think so, and we're going to explain why. And we're very mindful, of course, of the tremendous support that the UK column gets from Cornwall itself. But what's important is the truth. So let's have a look at what's really going on. Well, we've chosen the Mail, but we could have taken some of the other mainstream papers. A proud day for us. Cornish will be recognised as national minority group for the first time after a 15-year campaign. And of course, it's saying they're going to receive the same rights as other minorities. The public bodies must take their views into account when making decisions. I thought they had to do that already, Mike, but now they've got to do it, because Cornwall's been made Cornish. Campaigners, they don't appear to be named, say the region deserves measures such as fuel duty reductions. And of course, this is recognising the hardship in Cornwall at the moment, jobs, manufacturing, well, proper jobs anyway, all difficult areas, and Cornwall as a detached part of the UK, fuel duty going down would help. And of course, here we've got the next step, the government putting 120,000 into the Cornish Language Partnership. So the article itself gave some detail. I encourage you to read this, what's new, what this means for Cornwall. Ministers will have to think more about Cornwall. There's going to be social, education and other benefits, broadcasting. They're going to be recognised as a national minority under the European Framework Convention. There'll be full details of any economic benefit. So they're not too sure about the benefits there. And everybody agrees that the region, note the terminology, the region deserves special measures, and all of this is going to help Cornish identity, but doesn't necessarily bring any extra money. So essentially what we're reading here is that Westminster feels sorry for the Cornish and has been proud to tell them who they are. But this little paragraph is the key bit, because of course it isn't Westminster at all here. What we're really dealing with is the European Union. So let's come closer to home. This is the Western Morning News. Ministers agree to give Cornwall national minority status. We've got a picture there of a typical Cornish person, according to the Western Morning News. But let's look what's down at the very bottom here. Ministers are to include the duchy in their submission to update a European convention designed to protect diversity. So this whole thing is about European policy, and of course it's being presented as if it's coming through Westminster. Now, at the bottom of this Western Morning News page is a comment by a member of the public. It is a brilliant piece of work. It's analytical, it's accurate. Encourage people to go and read it. But this is part of it. It says, does a group of people linked by a shared history need to be given permission by some distant government before it declares itself distinctive? The Cornish don't need to be told about their ethnic status any more than the Scots, Welsh, or indeed any other people. It's in their DNA, traditions. It was always there. We don't need somebody to tell us we're Cornish. When we go to Twickenham and wave a flag, we know we're Cornish. Danny Alexander's crumbs, even to a people whose achievements give them so much to the world, are welcome. So they're picking up quite clearly. Here's the man, Danny Alexander, and he was making a visit to Bodmin, I think that was yesterday, and he said Cornish people have a proud history and a distinctive identity. I'm delighted that we've been able to officially recognise this and afford the Cornish people the same status as other minorities in the UK. Well, the commentator on the Western Morning News website had this to say: thanks, Danny. We'll add your offer of government recognition to the long-held worldwide acceptance of Cornish distinctiveness. But if you and your cabinet colleagues really want to help the Cornish, take a look at the unemployment figures, the state of the roads, the cuts to essential services. Attending to some of the problems facing the UK's poorest region would be real recognition rather than an election-driven rearrangement of David Penhaligon's deck chairs. So this Cornish person, of course, very astute and has worked out that what's going on here is a massive Tory and Lib Dem government scam in order to try and get pre-election votes in a very dangerous area for them by crowing that they've recognised the Cornish as an impoverished, out-of-work minority group that needs special treatment. Well, It started some time ago, because if we have a look at the state of the economy in Cornwall, we've got to come back to this sort of thing. Cornwall's fishing industry, which was an absolute mainstay of Cornish economy, absolutely destroyed by the Common Fisheries Policy. Guardian article here, but the meat is in the text. Most people are aware the system's broken. In fact, railing against the EU's common fishery policy is a British political ritual. So there's problems. If you go into the article, they accurately bring the problem to rest at the door of the European Union and the fishing policy. But of course, it wasn't only fishing. Farming devastated in Cornwall, as in the rest of UK, mining destroyed, and all of the other spin-off industries such as ship repair also very, very badly hit. Well, what sort of thing was going on in the background with the European Union? We'd like to draw your attention to this very nasty little organisation called FUEN. Now, it's presented at the moment as being a squeaky clean, upstanding initiative by the European Union to promote democracy and to protect minority groups throughout Europe. But in fact, its origins are somewhat darker than that. And we'd like to draw your attention to the work here by Rodney Atkinson. So this is part of his site. And what he's actually talking about here, if you go to it, is the roots of FUEN. And he says it was a Nazi racial propaganda organisation in the 1930s and 40s. And its periodical Europa Ethnica is a continuation of the Nazi organ, nation and state. The origins of the group are in the racial geopolitics of the German state, where the promotion of ethnic Germans in neighbouring countries was, and is today, seen as a method of breaking down other nations' boundaries, reuniting racial Germans, and it's to do with German imperial expansion. By extending these racial politics to other European minorities without a kin state, the promotion of the purely German strategy could be camouflaged. So that's where it was with the Nazis. And if you go to Rodney Atkinson's site, Free Nations, he's got a longer article here talking about the roots of the Nazi program to regionalise not only Germany but the whole of Europe, and of course in particular the United Kingdom. So a cunning plan. How was it to be carried out through the EU? Well, money is at the heart of this, and I've pointed this out before, but we need to think about Objective 1, some £320 million pumped into Cornwall, but unfortunately most of that money seemed to disappear. But what it left in its path was a trail of greed, fraud and corruption, and dependence on the EU begging bowl. To date, no full, detailed and audited accounts for the money have been produced, nor any summary of any real benefits it produced. And I believe we've still got a UK column challenge out, which is, if anybody's got them, could we have a copy of the full audited accounts of this massive slug of money that went into the European Union? So once you've got the money in there, people's attention follow the money. You can then drive in alternative funding streams which pull people in different directions. So Cornwall was bombarded with the European Regional Development Fund and the European Union European Social Fund, and all of this money was put through quangos such as the South West of England Regional Development Agency, which could boast of creating projects in Cornwall in particular that turned out to be totally fraudulent. Here's some of the other ways that Cornwall gets locked up into the European Union. This was an initiative to bring together communities located along Europe's shoreline, and it says it brings together some 160 of these shoreline regions, and we're going to bring you all together within the European Union. And it goes on. This one really says with no uncertain terms what the game was, because it was a convergence fund. economic transformation to converge the economies of nation states throughout Europe. So let's put it into a UK column diagram for you. The game is divide and rule, the EU subversion and destruction of Cornwall as a key part of the breakup of the wider United Kingdom. How do you do it? Well, first of all, you ruin the key industries, fishing and agriculture, by EU common fisheries and agricultural policy. Mining was simply allowed to collapse by the fact that the government refused to put in any investment in new mining equipment and techniques. Unemployment then increases, wages drop. Then what's happened in Cornwall, as in many other places, is many of those low-paid jobs are now having to be done by EU migrants, people the EU are prepared to sacrifice on absolute minimum wage. We then bring in Fuan, and their job is in the difficult economy to wind up public opinion to push for Cornish independence. We bring in the massive grants. That attracts people to the EU rather than the UK and Westminster. And this bit, which we should get on screen, here we are, of course, is the icing on the cake, because we got rid of 6 district councils in Cornwall and replaced them by a Cornwall council. It's almost Soviet. Promote the idea of taking power from the Westminster Quangos and NGOs to transform Cornwall Council into an assembly government. This was being proposed back in about 2009, and you're now moving towards total separatist movement for Cornwall. And here's the final bit. You've just awarded them now this wonderful minority status, which is pushing them forward. So what does it look like? Well, just have a look at the emblem for Cornwall Council. I don't get a warm feeling for this particular logo. It seems to me what's going on here is burning Cornwall. Yeah. So there we are, breakup and regionalisation of UK, and to get Cornwall broken away as a separate region, divide and rule at its best. We've mentioned Fuan with its Nazi origins, and we're going to say to you, just think about what we've got with the Bilderberg organisation, set up initially with Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, an acknowledged Nazi member and also member of the SS. So we're not making this up, we're just looking at the facts. And have we got these people at the heart of British government? Unfortunately, yes, we have. So this leads on, I think, to bigger things, including Agenda 21.
Well, it began by looking like a smaller thing, actually, because this is Griff Rhys-Jones, who has he's had a bit of a spat with Cardiff University. He was offered the chancellorship of the university, and then he wasn't offered the chancellorship of the university, but in fact he wasn't offered it just 1 hour before he was due to get it. So he was due to be presented with it, in an hour before that they called the deal off. So basically what had happened was the university court had decided that offering Griff Rhys-Jones the chancellorship when they hadn't actually asked the incumbent chancellor if he wished to stay in post was a gross breach of the rules, and so they called a halt to the ceremony at the last minute. And Griff Rhys-Jones has now said that he no longer wishes to be considered for the role. But what was interesting was how immensely proud of Griff Rhys-Jones' continuing work at the university as an honorary fellow and patron to the Sustainable Places Research Institute. So he's going to continue doing that job. But what is the Sustainable Places Research Institute? Well, as we can see here, it's a green and pleasant website with lots of research going on. A meeting place for world-leading sustainability science. That sounds very nice, doesn't it? In 2012, Wales held a conference in celebration of Rio Plus 20. And if anybody isn't aware of what Rio Plus 20 was, well, we'll come on to that in a second, but the usual suspects were there, including, of course, the World Wildlife Fund. But the Rio Plus 20 conference was the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, also known as Rio 2012, Rio Plus 20, and so on. The Earth Summit 2012 is another name that was given. And And it was all about reconciling, apparently, the economic and environmental goals of the global community. What's the global community, Brian?
Well, I think it's a group of very powerful people who think basically they're better than the rest of us, and they're going to do what they like. Do you reckon that's in the bracket?
Quite possibly. Well, let's just have a look at a couple of them. So, getting back to the putting Wales at the heart of Rio Plus 20, who were the presenters? Well, here's one: Peter Davies, Commissioner for Sustainable Futures. Then we've got John Griffiths, Minister for Environment and Sustainable Development at the Welsh Government. Another one, well, of course, as I say, World Wildlife Fund absolutely represented. And how do you pronounce that? Meikle?
Meikle, yeah, I would guess.
And what does she have to say? Well, she was talking about the Rio Declaration. She was basically given a bit of historical background in her presentation, and particularly on Agenda 21, and she was celebrating a decade of local Agenda 21. Of course, the Sustainable Places Research Institute was absolutely represented by Professor Susan Baker, and this is Griffiths Jones, Sustainable Places Research Institute, and she was talking about various things. She had a nice presentation to give. Human-induced environmental degradation and biodiversity loss. So let's blame humanity for everything. There's a certain amount of truth in that, I suppose, but that's usually as a result of corporate malfeasance rather than anything else. Increased urbanisation, population rise. These were all the issues that she was discussing. And all sustainability-related subjects, all Agenda 21 related subjects.
What I find so interesting about all this stuff, Mike, is we've got people, they go off to their little rooms and meet. We can't fix the potholes in the road. We can't provide simple jobs for people. We can't train our young people properly. But these people have got their focus on, we can change the whole world. We can make the whole world better. We can't fix the potholes. Living in their own reality.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Now, of course, along with this, the sustainability agenda comes the permaculture agenda, and this slide isn't going to work, but we'll put it in anyway. That permaculture is based on the idea of earth care, people care, and fair share. This is being discussed on the UK Column forums at the moment, and I think that's really why I've included in this.
This is part of Reset, which we're beginning to see as some sort of global government initiative.
Right. And on the UK Column website, Martin Edwards published over the last number of years a whole series of articles on One World Governance and global governance. And I just wanted to highlight this particular article, Abusing the System Through NGOs and CSOs. And this was written by a lady called Marietta Abels, and she gave us permission to republish it as part of that series. But I strongly recommend that everybody looks at the entire One World Governance series, because there's quite a lot about sustainability discussed, and also particularly the use of NGOs, which are the main sort of organizations that are pushing sustainability at a grassroots level. So this article in particular describes the rise of the NGOs, particularly driven by the World Wildlife Fund, and demonstrates, along with the other articles in this series, how the World Wildlife Fund and other NGOs have been key drivers for really what is genocidal political policy since it was set up. And whose money is behind many of these NGOs? Well, it's the usual suspects, isn't it? We've got the world's biggest genocidalist stroke philanthropist, because apparently philanthropy and genocide are the same thing.
Well, the more people you get rid of, I mean, this is sensible, Mike, the more people you get rid of, the fewer remain, and the easier it is to help them. So it makes sense to me.
Well, okay, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bill Gates, top of the list, of course, Warren Buffett, and as we pointed out yesterday, Warren Buffett would much happier to see oil distributed around the world rather than food.
Yeah.
And who else have we got then? Well, of course, George Soros. So these are the kinds of people that are behind the NGOs, and George Soros' NGOs, of course, not only involved in sustainability and Agenda 21, but they're involved in creating wars on the planet and revolution and various other geopolitical games being played by that particular philanthropist. Interestingly enough, then we have this gentleman, Michael Fallon, and he's been talking about shale gas. And this again is related to the sustainability thing, because this is the notion that carbon dioxide, of course, and carbon dioxide based power generation is really pretty nasty, particularly coal, and therefore they're looking for cleaner options. And Michael Fallon is announcing today a partnership with the Polish government in order to promote the shale gas industry. And really come up with the propaganda necessary to make sure that that agenda gets pushed through. So
lucky Poland, a strongly agricultural country, now going to get the fracking treatment.
Absolutely, but as I said, I've been saying a number of times over the last few weeks, the Prime Minister, Mr. Tusk, absolutely Oxford trained, British aligned, Western aligned type of leader.
Reframed.
Absolutely reframed, I believe, and of course he's. This is why Poland is suddenly being brought right into the fold. The government today announced £7 million to support Bristol as Europe's green capital in 2015. This, of course, this is Danny Alexander again. And he's announced that he must have been on his way back from Cornwall or something.
Yeah, so we got this, I think he's 41, it said in one of the articles. We got this young man that has appeared out of nowhere, really, who's now driving the world agenda.
He's being tapped to be the next leader of the Liberal Democrats, because, of course, Nick Clegg isn't going to survive for too much longer. So Danny Alexander is being tapped as the next one. But you know, what is this about? This is about funding will deliver a range of projects which will help Bristol remain at the centre of the green investment and urban sustainability. Some of the projects will include the Bristol Prize, a new annual award for the best new clean technology, a sustainable living programme in UK schools to educate up to 4.5 million children about climate change and how cities can contribute to tackling this issue.
I just wanted to interject, if I may. A little while ago, we had a gentleman on the programme showing the ultimate clean technology, which was a very clean battery.
Yeah.
And we can say to viewers that not only has the British government not supported his initiative at all in these battery cum fuel cells, but at the moment he's being hounded by HMRC. And every attempt to get this clean technology off the ground has been squashed.
Well, more than squashed, they're determined to destroy that man.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Presumably don't want to go on too many flights, judging by 370 and rumours about that one.
Yeah, so we're going to educate 4.5 million children with some of this money about climate change. So it's not going to be a discussion, it's going to be absolute propaganda. An international festival for clean technology business and a grassroots catalyst fund to incubate and develop sustainable urban living initiatives like permaculture, I'm quite sure. And so on. But look, if anybody wants to know more about this whole business, aside from reading Martin's fantastic One World Governance series on the UK Column website, please do have a look at the Agenda 21 Your Life in Their Hands ebook that can be read on the website or downloaded as PDF. Get a hold of that, distributed far and wide, and let's get some of this knowledge broadened out a bit.
Yeah, what we're really talking about here is a corporatist, fascist, smiling fascists. I think a few people call them. They're in the smart suits. But the agenda is to control people in huge numbers and to totally dictate their lives. So we're clearly looking at something which is fascism to some extent. And of course, if we look at the people, and Mike showed us some of them that are the people driving this, we've got this strange coincidence of roots back to the Bilderberg and the original Nazi roots. So make your own mind up. Please do your own research, and please have a look at that Agenda 21, Your Life in Their Hands book written by Martin Edwards. And we'll say thank you very much to all the people that are currently working, researching and producing material for us to put out as UK Column News and UK Column Live. It's much appreciated. Well, same people are stirring up the trouble in Ukraine, I think we can be quite sure.
Yes, well, in fact, here we've got the attempt by the New York Times and the US government to blame a lot of what's going on in the Ukraine at present, as Ukraine slides into civil war, on the Russians. And the New York Times published some photographs where RT here is showing the people that the New York Times has singled out as being Russian soldiers. The New York Times, unfortunately, has had to do a complete U-turn on this evidence, this so-called evidence of Russian troops in Ukraine. In fact, they have, well, what they said was, only now do we belatedly learn what should have been obvious. The blurry photographs provided by the coup regime in Kiev and endorsed by the Obama administration don't really prove anything, and so on. John Kerry continues to push this notion that it's only Russia that has to act on the Ukraine, that the US, the UK and NATO, who are all pushing like crazy and for a civil war in the Ukraine, they don't have to do anything, just Russia. And the Russian Foreign Ministry then issued a statement last night which really said it all, because they said that telephone contacts between Russia and the United States planned for yesterday and the day before did not take place for reasons beyond Moscow's control. Ahead of the discussions set for today, Russia again insistently calls on Washington to use all its influence on the interim government in Kiev to bring it to reason and convince it to refrain from rash steps plunging Ukraine ever more deeply into the maelstrom of crisis. And in fact, of course, none of that has happened, because today, if you look at the news of what's going on in Ukraine, there's more and more of this military action against civilians by the Ukrainian military. That country continuing to destabilize and fall into a very similar situation as Syria.
Yeah,
very serious.
Well, this doesn't happen by accident. It's politicians, male and female, that are causing all this trouble, and unless they're properly dealt with in an appropriate way, it's going to get worse. Luckily, I think the mood is that more and more people are waking up, and certainly at the UK column monthly meeting, which we had held last night, a number of new faces there, but all people saying we can see it. So if you're out there working hard to wake other people up and you're feeling a bit down and frustrated, we're going to say keep going, because it's obvious that people are slowly but surely now beginning to see through this nonsense being heaped on us, principally by the City of London and Westminster, but of course also under the guise of the European Union. You've got to take it seriously, though, because we're going to come back to the subject of Robert Greene, I think now on his 70th day behind bars. He's had no proper trial, no proper representation. And of course, he is an Englishman who has been taken north of the border by Scottish police and into a foreign judicial system. Now, it's becoming apparent to us that Robert, of course, is a very hot potato where Britain's, England's and Wales politicians are concerned. And although at the moment 3 politicians are beginning to show an interest in his plight, all of them are clearly very nervous, and we've seen some amazing responses in letters that have been sent back to individuals who've actually campaigned for their MPs to do something. One MP said, well, the problem is that due to devolution, this is a matter for the Scottish government. So here we've got an English MP who is calmly watching somebody lifted with no proper paperwork or charges by Scottish police, taken north of the border and simply locked in prison. But he thinks this is something for the Scots to deal with and not something for him to deal with as an English MP. So what we're starting to see is either these people are particularly stupid, that's one possibility, or else they're fully aware of what's going on, but they're too scared to actually stand up and be counted to do something about it. So the policy at the moment is going to be to continue to gently push for the MPs that are showing an interest in what's happening to do something. But probably the view is that if they fail to take that action, then their failure needs to be properly exposed and made public in a very full and appropriate way. We're going to say thank you to the Axis of Truth Pal Talk room. They've started a petition here. If you're not aware of this group, you might choose to go and have a look at Pal Talk. You can get it easily if you're on a PC. It's a little bit tricky on an Apple Mac, but you can certainly go and join and listen to some of the good work and discussion they're doing and the discussions they're having. But thank you very much, Axis of Truth, for supporting Robert Green. What they have also said as part of their petition is that they are also hearing now that there is increasing disquiet north of the border as people are finally beginning to question Alex Salmond on the missing documents surrounding the Holly Gregg case. We also believe that some of the more serious funders of the SNP are starting to ask some pretty pertinent questions about what Alex Salmond did and did not know in relation to the abuse of Holly Gregg. So that's pretty good news, really. But it does require everybody to continue to campaign for Robert, and please, if you can, write to him. I think he's getting about 15 letters a day, but he says these are wonderful to receive. He can also receive books, but anything you can do to keep his morale up is good, and of course any letters or emails you can send to put pressure on the political establishment to release this man, albeit on bail, so that he can prepare a proper defence, is very necessary. Well, where could this lead? I wonder whether shortly those of us in Devon are going to be worried whether the police from Cornwall, one Cornwall police, they're probably going to become, are going to hop over the River Tamar to arrest us and take us back into Cornwall without trial. I'm making a joke of it, but of course it's a very serious precedent. And we've already got the situation at the moment where it's perfectly possible for any of us in UK today to be extracted for any charge that the European Union decides to cook up. So we either fight this or we're going to go under, but we'll end this Friday on a good note to say it's obvious a lot of people are waking up.
Tonight, 6 p.m, Doomwatch. The guest this week is Sir Graham Bright, who is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Cambridgeshire. And Alex is going to ask him about subjects such as the use of IT in the police, care and support of those with mental health issues, how to raise concerns of the police, the use of tasers, turning activists into informers. And there are also going to be a few questions from viewers and listeners. So if you want to send a question into Alex, you can do so, or you can just put it in the chat box at the time. So Sir Graham Bright on Doomwatch tonight at 6 p.m.
Okay, and I'll just add to that this is quite an interesting event because a senior police officer has agreed to come on the programme. We can be sure that he might be a little bit nervous. I'm sure everything will go exceptionally well and in a professional way. And if that's the case, perhaps we can bring on some other people from within the establishment to answer a few questions. Last point is that it's also clear the use of FM radio is producing an interesting effect. So Peterborough FM, which is Doomwatch, is going from strength to strength. We've also, of course, got our own Louise Collins, who's been working now for about 18 months, 2 years, I think it may be, on her Sound Art FM radio programme, which is broadcast in the South Devon area. And last night we heard that another strong supporter and campaigner, Sarah, is about to get her own FM radio station a bit further to the east. So this is a very exciting precedent. Could all of those involved in campaigning for what's right and the truth grab hold of these local FM stations and start pushing out some real material? That would be fantastic. So if you've not thought about that, you might see what's available on FM in your local area. I think that's it, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a pleasure to be back. It's been quite a tough week, as we say, because the news in the national press is getting worse. But we hope you've enjoyed being with UK Column News. See you next week, same time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.